In the mid-2000s, following the release of Metroid Fusion, Metroid was at its most popular that it had ever been since its original release in 1986. From 2004 right up till 2007, there were a slew of Metroid games released, and one of the ones that fell under the radar was, of course, Metroid Dread. You might be familiar with the game, it just got announced at E3. This is a complete history of Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread, or Metroid 5 as it's also known as, was first showed up in 2005 in a magazine, claiming it was going to show up at E3 that year. There was also a bunch of other Nintendo DS games mentioned. All of them showed up that year except for Metroid Dread. Metroid Prime Hunters was on the verge of release, and a lot of people presumed Metroid Prime Hunters was Dread. However, this would later turn out to not be the case. Nintendo originally did not comment on Metroid Dread, and it went under the radar for a year. IGN then started claiming they'd seen the game and that it would be showcased at E3 2006. E3 2006 comes, no sign of Metroid Dread. People start asking, and Nintendo comments that they are not, quote-unquote, working on the 2D Metroid at this time, which implied that they were working on a 2D Metroid at some point. IGN later came out and said that Metroid Dread had been cancelled, but that it was worked on by Nintendo. And this was the last we would hear of Metroid Dread until 2007, when Metroid Prime 3 Corruption released an Easter egg in the Pirate Homeworld seemingly referred to the game. The scan log read, "Experiment status report update, Metroid Project Dread is nearing the final stages of completion." Fans misinterpreted this as referring to the game Metroid Dread. Nintendo came out and dismissed this as not being the case, and Retro Studios claimed it was a joke. And also, fans noticed that if you scanned the terminal next to it in-game, you would find out that Project Dread was an in-lore weapon being developed by the space pirates using Metroids as a power source, and the project fell through. Whether or not the name was a coincidence or if they did this to poke fun at the actual game is up in the air and still debated to the day. But regardless, it sent a lot of people questioning about Metroid Dread potentially showing up in the next E3. 2008 comes and IGN claim that apparently Metroid Dread is back in development. They claim to have seen a build of the game that it looked like a port of Metroid Fusion. Interestingly, we found out from E3 2021 from Sakamoto himself that Nintendo did have two attempts at creating Metroid Dread. The first one was in 2005, and according to Sakamoto, the second one is implied to be 2008, which lines up with what IGN are saying. So, building the bigger picture here, it appears to look like that Metroid Dread went into development in 2005, had about a year of development maybe, and then got shelved or cancelled, and then got brought back in 2008, and the project maybe fell apart because it looked too much like Fusion. My personal theory is that, simply that, it looked like Metroid Fusion. They couldn't get it to look different graphically. It didn't stand out as its own game, and I think that's the hardware limitations Sakamoto was referring to during the development history video Nintendo did during E3. So after that, 2008, Metroid Dread simply vanished. That was the last we'd heard of it. Interestingly enough, it was also reported that apparently in 2008, the game was no longer being referred to as Metroid Dread. Apparently the name had been dropped. I'm starting to believe this might have been the case. I think Metroid Dread was the original title, and then they were dropping it and they were going to see if they could adapt it into something else. I think they only used Dread in the final title of the Nintendo Switch version because they knew what it meant. They knew what using the words Metroid 5 meant. They knew fans would recognize it as a sequel to Fusion. And they knew by using the title Metroid Dread, fans would go crazy and everyone would immediately know this is the game they were working on years ago, and this is a sequel to Fusion. And just the marketing of them using the title of a game that was cancelled would get everyone talking about the game. So I think it was very smart of them, and as I explained in my last video, I'm very happy and grateful that they used Metroid 5, Metroid Dread as the title. I think that was really good marketing on their behalf. But regardless, in 2008, it fell apart. Sakamoto then teams up with Team Ninja for Metroid Other M. Gets shown at E3 2009 and comes out in 2010. Fans start asking him upon the game's release, is this Metroid Dread? Sakamoto denies that Metroid Other M is Dread, but also seems to confirm that they were two separate games. So at this point, it is confirmed that Metroid Dread was a real game, it wasn't a rumor. It existed in some form as a project Nintendo were developing. Metroid Other M comes out, and after that we went into a 6-year hiatus with the franchise. Until it was revealed that concept art surfaced in 2013 of a Metroid game, Next Level Games, proposed to Nintendo. And a lot of people seem to think this is the second attempt of Dread that Sakamoto was talking about, and this would make more sense to me that it would be a more powerful hardware, because 2008 seems too close to the original date of when they were working on the game. But I don't know, maybe there was a third attempt, or maybe this was a completely different game. I don't know, but either way, Next Level pitched a Metroid game, and Kensuke Tanabe intervened and had them work on Luigi's Mansion. And following that, Next Level went straight to work on Metroid Prime Federation Force. Under his supervision, the first Metroid game in 6 years. It came out on the 3DS, and of course, people asked if this was Metroid Red. Tanabe, for those who don't know, Metroid is kind of split into two things. It's one canon timeline, but the Prime games are very much a spin-off set in the middle of the timeline. Kensuke Tanabe is the producer there. He oversees everything with those games. And Yoshio Sakamoto oversees everything with the mainline Metroid games, the 2D games and Other M. So it's two different people working on these two different aspects of the franchise. And they don't really communicate other than to make sure their timeline makes sense. So Tanabe claimed that Metroid Dread, if it was real, had no relation to Federation Force. So that again confirmed that a completely different game. The following year, 2017, Metroid Samus Returns comes out. And this is where things get interesting and where things solidify properly for us. Yoshio Sakamoto was asked again, is this Metroid Dread? And the answer this time is interesting. He does say no, but he also says that Dread was a real game and it could be brought back at any time if Nintendo saw fit and that they would want to restart the game. And he also says that Samus Returns did borrow concepts from Dread. The touchscreen mechanic and the markers for the map all came from the original idea for touchscreen for Metroid Dread. And this was interesting. This got us all thinking that maybe Metroid Dread could finally happen. Lo and behold, Samus Returns comes out. Things go silent for a few years, until where we are now. 2021, Metroid Dread is revealed, finally being worked on by the team who did Samus Returns, under Sakamoto's supervision, and it's seemingly the exact same concept he had a few years ago, except I also noticed one interesting thing that he didn't bring up. The concept for the Emmy he mentions was core to the concept of Metroid Dread, and that seemed to be what they had going a few years ago. But I found something interesting. The Emmy is actually concept from Metroid 1.5, which is another cancelled game. It was a horror game, full-on horror game that was being developed by Retro Studios before Metroid Prime 2. This game had a lot of really creepy and disturbing looking concept art, but the Emmy seemingly came from that. 1.5's general concept was that you were on a space station, there was an AI with split personalities, and sometimes would stalk you and taunt you, and other times would be friendly and assist you. And this game had this whole focus on techno-organics and things like this. So it seems like the Emmy was inspired in part by whatever came from that game. And the concept art looks genuinely disturbing and creepy and fascinating, and I'm really hoping someday we get that game. Maybe they incorporate ideas into Metroid Prime 4, or they use a lot more of it in Dread. Either way, I really want to see that evil personality AI thing come up, because that's a really creepy idea, and I think would make for some really cool gameplay mechanics. But regardless, that's a completely different game. Metroid Dread, as its own right now, for the most part, is the same concept he had years ago. From what I can make out, he didn't really have a story in mind back then, so it didn't quite get that far. It seems like he had an idea for the gameplay revolving around being hunted, and the story was only just being figured out on both occasions, I believe. It seems like it's only now that the story really took hold. I'm sure he had the idea for the Galactic Federation and maybe even the Chozo, because bear in mind, the Metroid manga came out in 2004, and we had an evil Chozo in that manga. His name was Grey Voice. So Metroid Dread first started development in 2005, so it's not hard to believe that the evil Chozo idea was inspired from the manga. But that's purely speculation on my part. I have no proof for that. That's just what I'm thinking. Everything else, however, seems to line up with what we know and what we've been told over the years, and seemingly what's been speculated. But regardless, in short, that is the 15-year development cycle of Metroid Dread, the sequel to Metroid 4, Metroid Fusion, that came out all the way back in 2002. We're finally getting it after this long, tumultuous period, and I don't think we're ever really going to know the exact development around it, whether it was 2008 or if even the 2013 game was actually Dread, or if that was something else. I'm inclined to believe it's something else, because Mercury Steam originally pitched a first-person Wii U Metroid game to Nintendo. It was going to have a companion game on the 3DS, but Nintendo had no interest in a Wii U game. They liked Mercury's passion and enthusiasm, so they wanted him to make a 3DS game. They were going to do a Super Metroid remake, but Nintendo said Metroid 2, and the rest is history from there. But yeah, in short, that is everything we know about the history of Metroid Dread. I just wanted to do this video, get it off the top of my head, because I'm really excited for this game, as you can tell from my last few videos and my reaction. This game means so much to me. The fact that it's real is just blows my mind. I was talking about this game when I first started YouTube in 2013. Back then it was speculation. Now it's a reality. Expect a lot more Metroid Dread videos coming your way in the next few weeks and months ahead. And yeah, with that all said, I hope you enjoyed this quick look through the history of the development of Metroid Dread, and let me know down in the comment section below. Are you as excited for this game as I am? Will you be picking it up? I want to hear everything you have to say. And yeah, with that all said, thank you all for watching, and please subscribe. Novus Corvis out.